Good morning, dear Mr. Prime Minister, Minister, dear Mr. Mayor of Sofia, Your Excellencies, which means ambassadors and diplomats from the foreign embassies, dear Bulgarian and foreign guests, welcome to the 12th Regional CFA Conference for the better part of Europe, from the Baltics to Cyprus, from Ukraine to Slovenia. Bulgaria was the host of a similar conference 9 years ago, in 2017. At that time, the president of our Bulgarian CFA Society, Kazakhstan, Mitarachi, who is right here, had his opening speech, from which I remember one sentence that he repeated several times. He said, if I had known how difficult it would be to organize such a conference, I would have never done it. Well, I'm not going to say the same. However, you understand that organizing an international event with people from, as you will see in a minute, from maybe over 20 countries, even more, is not an easy task. That's why I would like to start with thanking a few people who helped this conference happen. Because we are financiers in our organization, we care about money, which I will repeat several times today. Let's start with the sponsors. You wonder why this conference is called the CEE conference. It's because these are our sponsors. The CFA Institute. This is our mother organization, headquarters in Virginia in the States, in London. This is our region, and in Hong Kong. Iliyana, it's one of the local financial big groups. And Expat Capital, this is where I work as well. Also, we have many partners. The hotel we're staying at, Hyatt Regency. I would like to thank Ms. Kevin Merritt for her support during the last months. Bookmark is our marketing company. Gentlemen Emanuel Tonev and Alexander Kristev. Also, the sound for today has been organized by Event Monkeys. It's a nice name. The video and the photos are by Mr. Nikolai Tornin. And also Force Delta are responsible for the smooth operation of this conference. We'll start with a small surprise. This time, we decided to have to prepare 3 awards. Initially, we asked all the CFA societies in our region, over a dozen, to try to nominate a big name from their own country, like a big reformer, a statesman, something like this. Maybe not surprisingly, none of them did. I'm saying not surprisingly because here in Bulgaria, our board also couldn't agree upon one name. You know, because we are 8 members of the board and we have 8 different opinions maybe. I'll come back to that in a second. I would like to thank also the members of the board of the Bulgarian CFA Society. We're 8 people, so Kazakhstan Metodiev is our long-term president, Ivailo Penev from Iliyana, Cvetomir Uzunov, Valentin Manev, Desislava Boneva, Ivailo Deliski, Nikolai Vanyov, and also very much our CEO, Gloria Nikolova, without whose big efforts for the last several months, this conference would have been possible. Also, a few people from the CFA Institute in London. They are very important for us. Lukas Dedes is from Greece. He's our regional, we call him PCR, which means President's Council representative. He represents our CEE region in the headquarters in Virginia, and he supports and defends our interests there. We're a small region, but we're growing and we're very active. Katie Davison-Jenkins. Katie is the heart and soul of CEE in the CFA Institute. Katie, without you, no CEE. And also, Mr. Robert Langrick, also from London. He's going to speak in a few minutes' time. We'll go back to the awards in a few minutes. Actually, it's a good moment now to start with Robert, who is going to also have an opening speech here for the conference. Robert, please come here.
Okay, good morning everybody. Let's get my note cards out here. Okay, so my name is Rob Langrick. I am at the CFA Institute, the Chief Product Advocate, actually based in the New York office, but indeed originally from London, so British, and have a little bit of grey hair. And it's quite exciting to be here today, because I remember quite a few things from my upbringing in the UK. I remember the Maastricht Treaty being signed. I certainly remember the excitement, the run-up to 1992 and the formation of the common market. I certainly remember the day the euro launched on the 1st of January in 1999. And I also remember when Bulgaria joined the European Union on the 1st of January 2007. So it's really quite thrilling for me to be here for the first time in my life in Bulgaria, on the front line, the 21st member of the Eurozone a few weeks ago. Now this is the 12th CEE conference, as we heard. It's the second one I've been to, however. I was lucky enough last year to be in Istanbul for the one in May. And there were some fantastic speakers last year. The one that stands out for many was Fatih Birol, the head of the International Energy Agency, really the voice of the global oil market. And there is a similarly strong lineup this year. So extremely excited for what's to come. And I actually went for dinner last night, and I met lots of speakers. I'll call out three I met last night. A Member of Parliament from Greece, a very entertaining person we'll hear from in a few minutes. I met a British architect who lives in Zagreb, and I met a Bulgarian national who lives in Hong Kong, who speaks no less than 5 languages. So I'll let you spot who that is, and I'll let you guess what the 5 languages are. Come and speak to me, and I'll let you know if you're correct or not. So congratulations on the CFA Society Bulgaria on putting together a very strong agenda today with high caliber speakers. A lot has changed in the world since the Istanbul conference in May 2025. But what I've learned over my career has been it really pays to be an optimist. So I thought what I'd share with you now are 3 good news statistics, which I quite like. First of all, the World Bank did a study fairly recently, and since 1990, 34 countries have moved to developed status according to the World Bank, and Bulgaria is one of those 34 countries. Secondly, I'm from the mothership, CFA Institute, and we are in a pretty good shape. We're having our best year since the pandemic, and this benefits the ecosystem we're all part of. We are currently 8% ahead of target in terms of new people joining the CFA program, young people around the world. And if we zoom in to this region, Central and Eastern Europe, I looked at the statistics, and in 2021, we had 1,386 young people join the CFA program that year, and last year, 2025, it was 1,806, so growth of 30% over that period. So the growth trend is global, and it's also local. So I want to thank everybody in the room for inspiring young people in your organizations to better themselves and pursue the CFA Charter. So I think the value of being a CFA Charter holder has certainly gone up, even since the launch of ChatGPT. We'll be talking about that a fair bit later, I'm sure. But in this world of doom scrolling and low attention span and brain rot, it's a great way to prove that your brain has not been destroyed by TikTok in particular. So I think the value's gone up. Also, on a more serious note, you hear that the future investment professionals, their main job will be checking the output of AI. Well, it's a little bit hard to check the output of AI if you don't know the basics. So I think that's another great reason why we're seeing the growth of foundational learning even in this AI age. Now, we are not sitting on our laurels at CFA Institute. A couple of recent innovations I'll share with you. In February, we launched a practical skills module on weaving in macroeconomics to portfolio construction. That was in the February window, pretty relevant, I'm sure you'll agree. We have a big innovation coming on the 5th of May. We are launching full integration of the Bloomberg terminal across all 3 levels of the CFA program. So you'll be hearing more about that, so getting learners desk ready. And also to recognise the cost of living crisis that's really happening around the world now, we are for the first time in many years holding all prices flat for the 2027 exam year for all CFA program registration prices, helping young people get on that ladder. Now, the biggest shift in the industry, of course, in our age is the shift towards AI. And I travel a lot around the world. I think I did 24 business trips last year to all 3 regions. And in every single meeting, pretty much, a topic came up about AI, whether talking to young people, worried about whether jobs will be eliminated by AI, to people my age, really curious about what other people are up to with AI. That's what I find in my generation. Everybody wants to know what everybody else is doing with AI. So I always ask the question, what prompts do you use? And I'll share a couple with you. There was a big money manager in Singapore recently who they feed their holdings, their portfolio holdings, into their LLM to ask it for risk exposures, to look for risks that perhaps they hadn't anticipated. I thought that was a good use case. The global head of equity research at HSBC in London, what he does, he feeds the new research reports into their LLM, and then he asks for weaknesses. He asks it to pick holes in the investment thesis. Really good, so you're not caught out when a client asks a question that you had not anticipated. And perhaps my favourite, there was someone more at the weekend, a weekend use case with AI. They love crime thrillers and whodunit books. And what they do, they feed the book without the last chapter into the LLM, and they ask the LLM who done it, and he actually finds it's quite accurate. So there's quite a fun use case outside the office to feed the book into the who done it into the LLM. So no surprise, I'm particularly looking forward to the segment on AI at the very end of today. I also noticed a really cool segment on architecture that I'm particularly looking forward to. Maybe they'll talk about wooden skyscrapers, we'll see. Now, just to close out, over my 50 years and over my career, each chapter always has had some global strife, and unfortunately that continues. I think energy security is the main theme so far in 2026. But there's a good saying in the commodity markets, which is the cure for high prices is high prices. And in fact, there was a great interview with Fatih Birol, the star speaker last year at Istanbul, who was on a podcast talking about what he viewed about the current world affairs. And he predicts a big boom in green energy, in solar, in nuclear power generation in particular, and in electric vehicle sales. He thinks 50% of all cars come 2030 will be electric. And he thinks that will be spurred by the crisis, the way we saw big changes after the 1970s oil crises as well. So I think there's hope. So our role as investment professionals is really to, yes, pay attention to the current affairs of the day, but never lose sight of long-term client objectives. So follow the trend lines, not the headlines. And so today, we'll be learning a lot about these trend lines. And so I thank CFA Society Bulgaria for putting on such a quality agenda today with caliber speakers. And for all of you, enjoy the show. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. A few more words from me. In Bulgaria, we should be very careful when we organize our next conference, because every time we do, the government falls and there are new elections. So maybe not all foreigners know, but Bulgaria just had elections last weekend. So we're just waiting to see what's going to happen. A few more words before I invite the next important person to speak. We are very proud that although Bulgaria is a small country with a relatively small financial market, unfortunately, our organization is very strong. The Bulgarian CFA Society has traditionally been the second largest in post-communist Europe. After Poland, but Poland is a big, very successful country. I mentioned post-communist because to the south, Greece and Turkey, initially they were smaller than us, but now they're growing very fast. So I haven't seen the numbers for 2026, but either way, we are very strong. We also have a similar number of Bulgarians globally who are CFA charter holders, but members of other societies because our financial diaspora is also very successful. I will express my view that the CFA charter holders globally should have more leadership roles. I wonder why they don't. Well, we know that the Prime Minister of Singapore is a CFA charter holder. In our region, we've had ministers in Greece, Cyprus, at the moment in Ukraine, Moldova, and probably others that I'm not sure about. Is Plamen Petrov in the room, please? He will come, but maybe later. I'm mentioning him because a long time ago, in 2001, King Simeon had 2 CFA charter holders in his government as ministers, and both of us happened to be the earliest, the people who got their charter as early as 1999, which is a long time ago. Also, a sentence to Lucas, I mentioned yesterday night, our region should probably try to appoint a CEO candidate for the CFA Institute. I'm not saying we will win, but we have to be there, we have to be active, although we're a small region, they have to remember us more. One more paragraph about something else we do here, and we're the leaders in this part of the world. We might be the only society in Europe, all of Europe, which organizes free training courses for the CFA candidates levels 1, 2, and 3, a weekend for each level. So these courses are held here in Sofia with high quality lecturers from London, from Fitch Learning. It's one of the globally successful companies in this area. And we have opened these courses, free courses, for all CEE candidates. So the foreign societies, please inform your candidates. If they want to travel to Sofia, to stay here for a weekend, have a nice time, but also study, they are welcome to come for free. Now, I have a few more thanks to say here. Iliyana, many people helped the organization. I will mention Iva Terzieva, who helped all the foreigners with their logistics, their travels. Iliyana Kostadinova, the lady over there, who has done miracles with preparing a number of videos, presentations that you are going to see today. And also we have a big bunch of volunteers, some students, university students, or high school students. For example, Simon Gulgarian, he's from Canada, and a big group from the Sofia High School of Mathematics. So now, back to the awards. As I mentioned, we didn't get any nominations, including from Bulgaria. So, still, our society decided to distinguish 3 very important people you'll see their names. The first one was a big name in the region after the fall of the Berlin Wall. So some of the younger people here might have never heard of him, but your parents have. He's from the biggest post-communist country in this area, the most successful one in my view, whom we remember as the father of the transition to market economy, and especially of shock therapy. His name is Leszek Balcerowicz from Poland. He is a professor, statesman, an economist, was a deputy prime minister twice, a chairman of the National Bank. There were two jokes at the time. One of them is a famous UK politician was explaining what shock therapy was. When they asked him, he said, if you want to make a transition from a state-owned, planned communist economy to a market economy, you have two choices: to do it gradually or to do it with a shock therapy overnight. It's the same like if the UK had to switch from left-hand side driving to right-hand side driving. Do you want to do it gradually or do you want to do it overnight? People might have different opinions. In my view, the shock therapy and the quick transition is better than no transition. So let me ask Desislava Boneva, our board member, to come up here, and also the representative of the Polish CFA Society, Piotr Polanowski, to receive the award.
Thank you kindly on behalf of
So Piotr, make sure Leszek gets this. He's been our guest in the past. The other two awards will go for current politicians. Now, as you guessed, this is very tricky, because maybe half of you will support what they do, will support their reforms, the other half might not. You will notice that all these politicians, the three of them, are mostly on the reformist side, not the populist side. They are mostly market-oriented, not very socially oriented. Nothing wrong with that, but you understand we are a financial organization. If we were the International Labour Organization, maybe other people would get those awards. So at the moment, one of the biggest turnarounds in our view in Europe is happening in our neighboring Greece. Now, you remember Greece went through difficult times. It's a long story, you all know the story. But in the last few years, the current Prime Minister, during his first and second term, he's been Prime Minister since 2019, has managed to reduce the debt to GDP ratio strongly. You'll be surprised by the numbers. Now, there are many measures to report, many ways to report debt to GDP. I have two numbers. Just 5 years ago, according to one of the statistics, it was at 2010%. The other one, that's probably the World Bank, 249%, one of the top three in the world. Look at now, just 4 years later, by 2025, it's gone down to 150%. So a big change. Also, Greece, unlike its long-term history, has achieved budget surpluses in the last 2 years. There were times when, for example, Prime Minister Stanishev was Prime Minister, although he is not right-wing. Bulgaria had enormous surpluses. You know what's going on today. And also, we like the concessions of public infrastructure in neighboring Greece. So, may I invite Valentin Manev from our board to give the award, and Mr. Notis Mitarachi, who's been a minister in two of the governments, to get the award for Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis. The last award might be the most interesting to you also. It will go to someone who is from very far away. But we believe he's the biggest reformer in the world at the moment. Argentina. The President Javier Milei, brought down inflation from 211% to 31%. This is just the beginning. He achieved his first budget surplus in 14 years. Great. He laid off 56,000 civil servants. Argentina is a bigger country, Bulgaria is smaller, so during Prime Minister Stanishev's term we laid off only 17,000, which on a per capita basis is even more. And also, something important which proves my view that it's not true that populists always win elections and reformers always lose because they are reformers. That's not true. I think it's the opposite. President Milei also won the interim elections. So, because Argentina is not in CEE yet, I will ask our board member Ivailo Deliski to show this award and to make sure it goes to Argentina. Maybe you have to take it physically there.
Dear colleagues, dear guests, probably you noticed that we are heavily weighted towards reformers, towards people that took popular decisions in order to fight with the nightmares in their country. I believe that this is the best example of how it should be done in the overnight, let's say. So the prize goes to Argentina, and we will do what is necessary to.
What it says in Spanish there.
In Spanish, it will be difficult to read in Spanish. El mayor, reformador del mundo.
Now going on. According to the law on state protocol, ministers are number 17 in the ranking, not very high. The mayor of the city where we're in is number 5, very high, just after the Prime Minister. So let me invite the mayor of Sofia, Mr. Vasil Terziev, who is not only the mayor, but he's also one of the most successful entrepreneurs, investors in this country, to have his opening speech. Mr. Terziev.
Welcome to everyone. Thanks to the organizers for bringing this event to Sofia, for the Institute for trusting us to have it here. And you've got a wonderful day packed with a lot of really interesting content, so I hope you make the best use of it. And I was thinking for quite some time what to say. And many of the things that were said before kind of made me change what I wanted to talk about. And we can talk about the issues of the world, the global economy, what's wrong, but really thinking about it, I come to the same conclusion most of the time, that there's a reason why we see many of the problems around us, and it's due to something very simple. It's the abdication from politics, from civil life, by the decent people, by the capable people. You manage risk, you manage money. Would you invest somebody's resources in a strategy you don't believe, in a management you don't trust, in an organization where you don't see much execution capacity? You wouldn't. But at the same time, we don't mind doing that over and over again when it comes to the way we govern our cities, the way we govern our countries. And we always come with the same excuse: it's not our job, there are better days, it will come at some point. But this point never comes for most people. And looking at all the young people in the audience who will see a lot of success in this life, this message is particularly targeting you. Do not shy away from politics. The world is what we make of it. And if all the good, decent, capable, prepared people who enter public life with the right set of ideals, with a properly calibrated moral compass, we will not be talking about many of the headlines we are talking today, because it's due to the collective decisions or lack thereof of all the people. And the weight is always on the more capable, on the more successful, because you have more to give to this world than the people who don't know and who have not achieved anything meaningful to be able to share it with others. So I leave you with this thought. When is the right time for you to make the decision that Mr. Vassiliev did, Mr. Mitarachi did, to move from the convenient life of the public sector, of an ordered life, to the messy world of politics, but knowing that your contributions will make a really big difference. And we will have a much different public sector if people like you who understand how to manage finances, who understand the implications of policy, who have long-term thought, who have many things that we severely need, whether you joining directly or you helping others who are already in public life, but making use of this talent, of this capacity to make our societies better. Think of that, and hopefully it will be sooner than later, because all of us need all of you in order to make our societies and the world as a whole healthier. So enjoy the day, and thank you for visiting our wonderful city. I hope you would be able to also walk around and understand why it was Konstantin's favorite city. Thank you.
Now we're going to the panels. We have a very ambitious agenda today, as you know, with some very diverse, I believe, super interesting people in all 5 panels. We don't have enough time for me to explain in detail who all these people are. You will see some of their biographies on screen. You've seen them in the invitations. But very briefly, the first panel we call the Visionaries panel. In it, we decided to invite 2 very important and very successful politicians, and very different from each other also. You know both of them. Briefly, Stanishev was Prime Minister of Bulgaria. He was one of the very few to survive a full term, which today would sound very exotic. Also, afterwards, he was the president of the Party of European Socialists for 10 years, 2 consecutive terms, which is a big thing. You know, Bulgaria is a small country, but having the chief of PES is a very important achievement. Mr. Stanishev, in these capacities, has been all around Europe 1,000 times. One of his universities is the London School of Economics. Notis Mitarachi, he's a CFA charter holder, of course. In his youth, he also studied at very important universities, and in his youth, he worked in the City of London at Fidelity Investments, which, as you know, is one of the big names in the financial industry. He moved to the Greek government. He was deputy minister, then minister at 2 other ministries in 2 governments. He's an important member of parliament, and he's somehow the connection between our profession and public service. He's from Nea Demokratia, which is the ruling, more conservative party in Greece. And so both of them, you would agree, are very pan-European. They are super connected to this continent. This time, maybe a small surprise for you, we decided to invite not people like us, but 2 other people to moderate this panel. Almost like a Gen Z people. And they are very different from each other too. Now, where should I start? Let me start with Margarita. She's from Kazakhstan. Briefly, as far as I know her biography, she studied, worked, and lived in places like Shanghai in China, Bali, Indonesia, Hong Kong, Dubai. So, in a way, she's Miss Eastern Civilization. Iliyana, she's Bulgarian, but she's been at universities in Boston, New York, Berlin, Paris, and as far as she was accepted at Columbia University as well, but she's going now to the UK to study law, so you would agree, Miss Western Civilization. Please join the panel, all of you, and the floor is yours.
So, you're all, first of all, I would like to say welcome, and then I want to say that I'm beyond privileged to be moderating a discussion on the economic and geopolitical reality of Central and Eastern Europe, especially at a time of such stark change and realignment. As we speak, we find ourselves in the eye of multiple storms at once. A technological revolution, intense geopolitical change, and economic uncertainty all knocking at our door. And it is precisely at this moment that Central and Eastern Europe must once again work to carve out its own place and voice in the world. In that context, our next panelists are among the most prominent figures to have shaped Bulgarian, Greek, and European politics over the past 3 decades. I'll begin by introducing the professional biography of Dr. Sergei Stanishev, and Margarita, after me, will follow with that of Mr. Mitarachi. So we get to jump to the fun part immediately then, which is asking our renowned panelists questions, and given their experience, we're going to find out some curious answers. So my first question is a broad one to Mr. Sergei Stanishev. I'd like to hear your perspective on Europe's future and to invite you to share your vision about its trajectory, both the trajectory of the European Union that you're seeing and the one that you would want to see. So I'm going to make the assumption that both me and the audience really want to hear your big take, if you would be willing to share with us.
Thank you very much, Iliyana. And it would be really boring for the audience to listen to our biographies, which are quite humble, twice in a very short time. And let's save the time for talking and discussing.
Make us feel older.
I'm afraid so, but you can look at the pictures, you cannot escape reality. Anyway, first of all, it's a great honor to be here, guest of this conference of the CFA Institute, especially the Central and East European Association, because you are important. I would say in this world of lack of trust, your certificates and the work of the CFA Institute is a kind of guardian of trust in a very shaky world where nobody sees a lot of anchors. And I'm very happy to hear what Nikolai said about the role of the Bulgarian CFA Society, which is the second largest in Central and Eastern Europe. We should be proud with this. This is great. And I asked myself 2 questions when I was invited. Why? Why are they inviting me? I'm a former Prime Minister, not an acting one. And then I'm a humanitarian by education, but also by my way of thinking. And what shall I be doing in the world of figures and formulas, which I don't understand very much. In our economic policies at the time when we were together with Nicolae government, we were more following, basic rules and common sense, but it came out to be successful. Anyway, then I thought it over and said, maybe there are few benefits when you invite not the acting Prime Minister but the former one, and I know that you have been inviting such figures as Volkan Šušel, Adrian Nastase, Joseph Muscat, I all know, and they're very interesting speakers. But Prime Ministers in office, they have many limitations. First of all, their horizon is very short. It's the next elections. Sometimes even not the parliamentary elections, when they'll be judged by the voters, but the next local elections, or the presidential elections, which are important for his or her party. So the horizon is very short, 1 year, 2 years, maximum 4 years, until the Judgment Day. Then they also narrow in their focus, because every day, every Prime Minister is facing a crisis. In one sector or another. A natural disaster, an economic crisis, a social protest, whatever. And it is like, driving a car with a very high speed. You are entering like a tunnel, and you don't look what's happening on the sides. And I think that may be beneficial to listen to former politicians who don't have the limits and the burdens of the acting ones, and who can have a broader view and speak out things which acting politicians may not dare to share, because there is a price. The words, especially of prime ministers, they create realities. I mean, look at the war in Iran, when every time when the markets get unrested because of the war and the prices go up, President Trump comes out and says, we're almost finished, and then the markets calm down and the prices go down for a while, but for a while only. So maybe this is the reason. I hope I don't disappoint you. And I would like also to share something personal about Nikolai Vasiliev, who is the driving force of this conference. We had quite complicated relations in the past. When I was elected Prime Minister, he belonged to a different party, a center-right party, a liberal one. And he was leading in the list of his party in the only constituency in the country where they beat my party. And by chance, his campaign manager was my future wife, who I didn't know at that time. But that's life. So we started with a lot of mistrust, being forced by the results to be together in the government and having one big, but really important goal, to drive the country to the European Union. And it happened in 2007. Gradually, delivering reforms, making policies, arguing very often, sometimes in a sharp way, we established confidence between each other, which later turned on into a friendship. So thank you, Nikolai, for this life experience for me. And now I'll go to the point about the world and Europe, where we stand. Probably most of you don't remember, especially the younger people, there was a very famous book at the beginning of this century, written by Thomas Friedman, a very prominent political and economic commentator. He is still very active. I advise you to follow him on YouTube and many other things. The World is Flat was the title. And it was, I would say, an expression of his belief that, okay, all the contradictions, the Cold War is over. The world is really global. We're all benefiting from this, and it will last forever. In a way, in the spirit of Fukuyama at the end of history. But now we see that the world is still round, it's a globe, and it is shifting very fast. And not in the best way for Europe, because there is a logic in everything what's happening. First, the centers of economic growth and innovations has shifted. The United States after the Second World War was half of the global economy. Now it's 25%, maybe even a bit less, it depends how you count. China is growing tremendously, Asia in general, and the rest. So political and geopolitical shifts are following the economic trends. We cannot expect dominance of one force if it loses economic grounds. Yes, there are compensators as military might, bases and other tools, but this is not sufficient. So it's very important to be critical in thinking and to look into the realities and adjust to these realities. And also another thing which we are facing in the past years, that the global order shifting towards disorder and high unpredictability. In Europe, we have been used to believe that, okay, the United States is the guarantor of the global order. And this is like, like the sheriff in town. But what we do if the sheriff starts shooting the citizens of the town and attacking his own allies? We saw tariff wars, we saw the Greenland story, now we're facing the war in Iran, to which Europe is very, very vulnerable. Whatever the outcome and how long it lasts, we don't know. I hope it finishes very soon, because otherwise we may be pushed, all of us, towards a global recession. And all the positive prospects by the World Bank, which Rob mentioned, may be simply not valid, because it was not calculated. So Europe is in a very vulnerable position, because we are the ones who benefited most, I would say, from globalization and free trade. We are losing our security anchor and the feeling of safety. We see, and it is now a very fashionable topic to discuss, that Europe is losing in competitiveness. And we are like, lost in this world. Spengler wrote after the First World War, the twilight of Europe. It didn't happen until now, but we went through a Second World War, which was also initiated in Europe. So I would say we have really to look at the world as it is with its complexity. And the first thing we have to do as European Union is really to focus on ourselves. Focus on ourselves and reform ourselves, however painful it is. And the recipes are quite clear. You've all heard, I believe, about the Draghi report, the Latter report. It's a sharp, very clear analysis about the state of play and our weaknesses, and very good recommendations what we should do. But they were approved, by the way, by the European Council 1.5 years ago, and very little of these recommendations have happened. But it is clear we have to accomplish the common market, which doesn't exist in telecom, in energy, in capital markets, and in savings. We have to do it fast in order to scale up our potential, because I believe that the potential of Europe, in our scale, 450 million people, the largest highly paid market, I would say, in the world, is bigger than the United States in many ways, in many aspects. For sure bigger than the Chinese at the moment. And we really have to accomplish it in order to be competitive. And then another very important element, I would say, is to lift the chains for the initiative of European entrepreneurs. It might be strange to hear it from a person belonging to the social democratic movement, but we could see that bureaucracy is creating a red tape which is simply killing and limiting every possibility and potential which exists in Europe. And this is part of the recommendations of the two reports, but it is still not happening fast enough. And this is why I would like to address all the audience. We have, and not we particularly, but every sector has to execute pressure, to speak out the voices, and also to press on the governments to do something. The second aspect is the international one. In the world of disorder, Europe, in my opinion, has to be you know, the anchor of stability, predictability, and fair cooperation. Because no one likes to be bullied by the big powers, because it looks like we are moving towards, you know, the world where the strength matters. And if you have the strength, you don't care about the rules. But for the majority of the countries, the small and medium size, they are looking for possibilities. And I think that Europe can benefit a lot establishing new political and trade relations, which is happening, by the way, but not fast enough, with India, with Mercosur, with many other regions, Australia and Canada, which was under severe attacks from, unfortunately, from the United States, etc. These are new possibilities for Europe. But in order to do this, Europe has to reinvent itself. And I would say the major benefit from the European project, which is a dream after all, is peace. And we have forgotten this word. Without peace there is nothing. There is no economic prosperity, there is no human development, nothing like that. So that would be my two major conclusions and hopes about the future of the European Union. And the second aspect I would like to touch is Central and Eastern Europe. I believe in our region, strongly believe. I think we are more resilient than Western Europe, because we went through in the last 30 years through such reforms, so painful, Valcerovic and all the rest, and where we were not with shock therapy. We had our pains which were very bad and very negative, which were prolonged, probably more than necessary, a lot of mistakes, but we survived. And we are flexible and dynamic, and this is a big benefit and possibility, but there is one no, one but. We have to learn in the region that nobody will grant us something. Look at the Draghi report. 230 institutions have been consulted. Think tanks, NGOs, whatever. All of them from Western Europe. Not a single one from our region. Which means that the recommendations don't reflect our ideas, our interests. So we have to pick them up and to defend them at a European and international level. And we have to learn to work in much closer cooperation. Because each of our countries is too small as a weight of voices in the institutions of Europe, so we have to cooperate closer. Especially, I would say, this axis, Athens, Sofia, Bucharest. Romania is the largest country, now about 80 million people, but can it be comparable to France or Germany? No. But together, and especially if we incorporate also Croatia, Slovenia, and we work in a better way with other countries, we can achieve more. So this would be my major aspects. And in the end, I would say now, there is no time for delay. We have to really focus on what we have to do. It's a test for political will. I hope it exists in the European Union, although there are not too many signs in the past years. But there is one encouraging signal. Tomorrow, the European Council, I think, have to decide during the Cyprus presidency, a country from our region, about a roadmap, practical roadmap for European competitiveness. Let's wait and see, but let's not relax, because nobody will do our job for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your answer, and I want to add just one final one to what you said. You mentioned that the Draghi and Letta reports were authored more than a year and a half ago, that they're rhetorically and ideologically well embraced and received in Europe, but they're not acted upon. So my question for you is, what type of mechanisms do you think are lacking on a European level to more quickly implement such grand policy recommendations that are embraced rhetorically but not in practice?
I think that the politicians, the governments are very often hostages First, of their low popularity, because in Europe now there are very few governments who are very popular, so they don't feel the political strength to go in a courageous way forward and to say, okay guys and girls, if you want to really survive, we need to make next steps towards European integration. Politicians have been used, I've never used this practice, to say everything what happens good is due to our government. Everything bad, it's the bad guys in Brussels. But I've always been saying publicly, in media participations, Brussels is us to a very high extent, because the most powerful institution in the European Union is the European Council. Who is sitting there? Our governments are sitting there. And nothing can be decided without us. And I think this is a major problem. And this is why I'm saying pressure is needed on every government. Because business very often doesn't realize, and also at the European level. Look what the European Union is doing when the farmers, which is probably the best organized sector, they bring their tractors in front of the European institutions. Immediately something is happening. I'm not calling for a revolt here, but something has to be done. No time to delay, because otherwise all these bad stories about Europe in decline, about irreversibility, may come true. But it's in our hands. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your speech.
Similarly, I would like to ask Mr. Mitarachi, if I may, can you express and define your political vision today? What are your core ideas and principles that guide how you think about Europe's future?
Thank you so much, and first of all, may I thank Nikolai and his team for the very kind hospitality. It took them only 9 years to re-invite me to speak at the CFA conference in Sofia, but I'm delighted to be back. I have to admit that the socialist politicians in Bulgaria are extremely more serious than the socialist politicians in Athens, and I very much enjoyed your intervention. I would agree with most of the points you have raised. And if I can also echo the point made by the mayor of Sofia, who left a very successful career in entrepreneurship to join politics, it would be great to see more people with experience in the financial markets, but also more younger people to decide to go into politics. It's a much different life. The energy of politics, the adrenaline, gives you a lot of fulfillment, a lot of sad moments maybe, but also the feeling that you have the ability to contribute to the way society is evolving. And it's a virus in the end. The famous Greek politician said 100 years ago that the virus of politics leaves the body 6 months after physical death. And that's why most politicians in the end, they remain into politics one way or another and remain active in public debate. There's a lot of discussion about what is happening in Europe. And I think if you look at polls around most European countries, there's a lot of pessimism today among European citizens about the standing in the direction of the European Union. And I think many times we underappreciate what has happened in Europe over the last 100 years. I was supposed to come yesterday morning from Athens, but I had to be in Parliament at noon. So I missed the direct morning flight. And then I did something which you couldn't do years ago. I took the flight to Thessaloniki, and then I took the car. I crossed the border in 1 minute, and it took me around 3.5 hours from the airport of Thessaloniki to be on time for dinner, actually ahead of Nikolai for the dinner yesterday at the restaurant. If you think about what would happen 5 years ago, I should have added 3 hours in the trip to cross the border. If you go back 30 or 40 years, you couldn't cross the borders. If you go back 120 years, we couldn't agree on the borders, we were fighting over the borders. And I think we underappreciate what has happened in Europe during my father's generation and my generation. economic growth, social cohesion, peace, safety, democratic values. If you compare the standard of living of the European citizen, it's not only the money in his pocket, it's the safety in his house, the democracy, our values. And you think how many billion people in the planet do not share the same conditions. I'll go back to what I started this paragraph saying: we underappreciate what has happened in Europe over the last 50 years. And there's a new generation of people which I call Europeans. I was born in Greece, studied in the UK, studied in France, worked in Poland, worked for a short period in Croatia, worked for a short period in Ukraine. And I'm an example of most people in this room, people that lived over so many countries, and we feel Europe is our common home. While we still treasure our cultural identity, we are part of what Europe is. Still, Europe has a lot to do for further integration. And some people would say it is still not allowing bigger companies, bigger projects, that was the discussion I was having before with the mayor of Sofia, to evolve in Europe, compared, for example, to the United States. That we still have different markets, different regulatory frameworks, different financial markets, and still that creates an obstacle for economic growth. But it is true today that Europe still has a lot of issues with governance, vision, what we want to achieve in the years to come. Years ago, I was attending a meeting of representatives of national parliaments held in the European Parliament in Brussels. A speaker before me said, when the US innovates, China replicates, and Europe regulates. He's wrong, that because China innovates as well. So we are still regulating. I've been a member of the Council of the European Union for 7 years. I served for 2.5 years in the Foreign Affairs Council. I was president in 2014, where we were negotiating the international agreements, the trade agreements of the European Union with the rest of the world. It took us so long to discuss the same paragraph. And every 3 months we were meeting, we were saying exactly the same things. I was a member for 4 years of the Justice and Home Affairs Council. We were debating Bulgaria's accession to Schengen for so long. And that is a fact that is constraining Europe. Still, our institutions are extremely slow, too many voices, and that is an obstacle at a world which is changing. But I'm also proud of what Europe is. At a time where the world is driven by strength, we are driven by values, and I'm proud for that. We have this moral advantage. It might not be the most efficient strategy at a time where we're seeing land grabbing becoming a driver of international actors. But we are with our democratic values and international law, and that's what makes Europe different. But at the same time, we need to invest more in our economic growth. So one of the key drivers of political ideology needs to be, how do we maximize economic growth in Europe through competitiveness? We have demographics against us, and that's a major issue for the European Union. But as a former Minister of Migration, I would clearly say migration is not the answer to demographic challenges. And maybe that's a provocative position in Europe. It's a big polarized debate between the left and the right, as you very well know. But economic growth, competitiveness, innovation needs to become a key driver of the European Union. And obviously, to achieve that, we need to deregulate. We need to allow European companies to breathe, SMEs especially. And if you look at the region, the Central and Eastern Europe, SMEs is a key driver of our economic activity. So deregulation is critical. At the same time, social cohesion is critical. We need to find ways to ensure that people are not left behind. But this can and only can be achieved as societies that have economic growth. You cannot have social cohesion without economic growth. We've seen the experiment failing in Eastern Europe in previous decades, where they were trying to achieve social cohesion and equality at economies that could not achieve production. And also what is critical for Europe is to achieve security and safety. We used to live in a world where we thought NATO is the answer to our security needs. And NATO should be, in theory, a solution to our security needs. But we see today that it's less stable than it was some years ago. And it's difficult to predict what will happen ahead. I think when I started my previous speech at the Sofia CFA conference, I said, we live in turbulent times. And when I was writing this phrase in my notes for today, I realized I used this phrase in each and every speech I made since 2010. So living in turbulent times is not the exception anymore. It's the rule we need to live with. So we shouldn't mention it again in our public speaking that we live in turbulent times. Yes, we do live in turbulent times. But what that needs is answers. And Europe, for example, needs to invest more in common markets. We need to invest more in energy autonomy. We need to invest more in regional cooperation. We need to invest more in defense. And that will be a big strain to our budgets for the years to come. Greece already is investing ahead of the NATO target in defense. Many Western countries that they thought they have defense capabilities, they soon realize that they don't actually have defense capabilities. They're very slow to react into international crises. And this will be a big strain for Europe. But also, common European defense policy, it is much needed today as part of the common European space. So, economic growth, social cohesion, defense need to be the key drivers for the European Unions in the years to come.
Thank you. And now I wanted to ask another rather sensitive question to Mr. Mitarachi. Right now the world is going through experiencing two major military conflicts, the one in Russia-Ukraine as well as the one in the Gulf. It's always devastating, but which one do you consider more consequential for the future of the global order and why?
We have had a lot of geopolitical changes in the last few years. And they're not the only geopolitical challenges Europe is facing. We forget sometimes that we have a member of the European Union, Cyprus, which is still divided for the last 50 years, still another unresolved geopolitical crisis. The Russian invasion in Ukraine is a huge strain to what we call international law. And for Greece it has been a difficult situation because although we have always politically belonged to the West, we always had historical and religious ties with Russia. And for us it was a huge shock, but we took a very clear view that we are in favor of international law. And we don't believe that international disagreements can be resolved with aggressive military invasions. And it has taken too long for diplomacy to resolve the crisis in Ukraine. I'm not very optimistic that something is happening very soon. There was a window maybe some months ago which closed quickly, and now international tension has moved in the case of Iran. Another extremely difficult situation. I cannot say that the world has not been concerned over the many years with the said desire of Iran to achieve a nuclear arsenal. That has always been a threat for the international community. And for people that are talking very vocally in Europe about human rights, they have forgotten what's actually happening with the treatment of people, especially women, in Iran over many years. For some peculiar reason, the left in Europe that is very vocal about most things in the world has very rarely taken the opportunity to speak about how are people being treated with regard to democracy and women's rights in Iran, which I find it very shocking and appealing. Obviously, what is happening today cannot easily be understood and accepted under international law. And Greece, as a member of the Security Council of the United Nations, an elected one for the 2025 and 2026 period, strongly advocates that we need to very quickly resolve these conflicts in a way which is in accordance with international law through diplomacy and not through military hostility.
Thank you. And now, if you don't mind, I'd like to shift our focus a little bit from politics to personal and to the lady here. Could you tell us more about your dreams and hopes for Europe in the future?
Thank you for asking me. So my background is that my education is in political science and I also work in politics. So I actually, even on a personal level, dream of a more integrated Europe quite often. And when I think about Europe, I think of it in two ways. First, it's sort of a retrospective look of what it's achieved. And then I think of it in the sense of its horizon today and what it lays ahead. When I look back, I see Europe as this sort of miracle which managed to establish itself as a driver of internal peace within the borders of Europe, which we nowadays, our generation especially, might take for granted, but looking back, this is just an incredible success. So I definitely want to see Europe maintain this pillar of its identity as flawlessly as it has in the past. But I also remember that I keep in mind that another pillar of the European idea was economic integration. And on that aspect, I think that Europe, as we have discussed already on this panel, has done a little bit more poorly. But I think that we can also see the situation from a more positive angle, meaning that Europe's greatest untapped asset, in a way, is its fragmentation, because this is a task that we will be able to fix in the future and work on, rather than take for granted. But I echo the idea that we have a single market only on paper, but in practice, especially in Central and Eastern Europe, we still operate in silos. Capital doesn't flow freely. We have 27 different legal systems which disrupt businesses and the way we scale business and ideas in Europe. So my vision is that I see one day, I hope, a genuinely integrated economic space where a startup in Sofia, Tallinn, or Bratislava has the same access to funding, talent, markets, and infrastructure as one in Berlin and Amsterdam. And I would like to see financial and infrastructural connectivity increased in the entirety of Europe. And the second thing that I would also want to echo about, a lot has been said, and I'm sure I won't say anything new, but it's just too important of an issue to miss, is the pillar of European defense. I think, reading history, it's actually easy to spot that one of the biggest names in European politics, like Charles de Gaulle, as early as the 50s and the 60s, were insisting on a European pillar, separate from anything like NATO or a transatlantic partnership. But because of different contexts, their ideas sort of toned down. But now, even if we don't look at their ideas and how they very clearly write out and spelled out for us how we should invest in our own defense, we can also just look at the last year and what it has brought on the back of Europe. Just the behavior and approach to the last Trump administration, I think, has exposed a huge vulnerability on European soil. And I believe that Europe, again, should see this as an opportunity to quickly invest in its own defense, because I believe that a continent that cannot defend itself is one that cannot invest in itself. And I also believe that we are stronger when we take care of each other on our own soil, rather than outsource something as vital to an external factor, even if historically it's a very trusted partner. So these are the classic sort of ideas that I would bring about as something that I would want to see take fruition in Europe in the future.
Thank you.
And I want to take the opportunity to circle it back to you and to ask you, what are your dreams, what are your visions?
Okay. Well, to be very honest with you, do not have that much political background. My background is more corporate, and I work towards pursuing my entrepreneurial ambitions as well. And to me, being successful in the future, personally, is building something long-lasting, strong, stable. And for Europe, I believe it's kind of similar, but on a much bigger scale. It's having strong economy. It's about innovation and security. It's not about choosing globalization versus innovation. I believe that from a business perspective, whether you're in corporate or entrepreneurial, there are several factors that matter that people look forward to. It's stable markets, diversified partnerships, and strong economic positioning. So my dream is rather simple for myself, to build something fundamental, something that I'll be proud of, and for Europe to remain confident, economically strong, and have reliable partners to global economy, to global community.
Thank you.
Speaking of global community, there are a few questions that I wanted to ask both of you. When we compare Europe to United States and Asia, specifically China, do you believe Europe is keeping up in terms of competitiveness, innovation, and influence?
No. I mean, this is a commonplace. We all understand it. And we have to learn also from China, and also, again, look at the realities. For 300 years, Europe was the dominant global power in education, innovation, and production. This is not the case anymore, and it will not be reversed. We have to adapt, and we have to find new sources of our growth, and I think the greatest source is the human capital. Is our talent, our educational system, and what Notis said, that we are the best place to live in the world. It's not America, it's not China, not India, it's Europe. So let's keep it, but in order to keep it, let's upgrade. And indeed, we have to massively invest. Invest in productivity. Finally, industrial policy, which was almost a bad word in Brussels language 15 years ago, it is on the agenda, so let's focus on this and let's do it.
I think starting with the no, it's obvious. Europe needs to do much more. China has the advantage of the ability to plan for the long term. Ministers there might be for 10 or 15 years in the same position, the teams are there for 30 years. That gives them a lot of stability. Europe, you spoke about the European Council. Probably there are no two meetings with the same composition because one prime minister changed in one of the countries between the meetings, so that means that Europe is less stable. Obviously, this is part of our democratic values and we should never change that. But it means that we need stronger institutions, we need a more common thinking, which we have failed to achieve. Still, the European institutions are very complex and they do not produce the results we need at the time we need. You see, for example, the fact that we have an energy crisis in the world, some economies already reacted, some countries taken measures, and the EU is still debating on what to do and how to do and when to do. We don't have the same ability, the time to market, if I can use the term, to cope with international changes. Obviously, we have the advantage of our human capital, that's very critical, but we need a much bigger market. And I think that's something we still haven't achieved. You mentioned that before, the fact that we have very diverse legal frameworks, legal systems, that also plays a role. And I'll go back to the point I made before, our demographics are also not helping on the long run, and this is a big challenge. European families are now much smaller, people have less kids or choose not to have kids. It's not driven by economic factors. It's a mistake that people trying to attribute demographics to economic factors. were actually wealthier than our grandparents that had 10 brothers, each of them. It's a social choice that modern people are making, which is on the family level extremely well respected. Everyone has the right to choose how they want to live, but on a societal point of view, it is becoming a big headwind for us.
Thank you. And who do you think will lead globally in the next decade, and why?
If I knew that, I would invest in the markets and belong the country that would lead the world. I don't think we can make a linear prediction. That's the mistake most financial analysts we do. We start a model and then we find a growth rate in perpetuity and we try to predict the revenues of a company year 2063. I can bet anything you want that the number will be anything other than your estimate. So it's impossible to do a linear adaptation. You've seen how rapidly things are changing in the world. So I don't think you can plan for the long. You can predict a global winner in 10 and 15 years. You shouldn't ignore what's happening in Africa. Africa is becoming a stronger relative continent versus what it used to be. I would answer this question with an aspiration. I hope Europe comes back. We were actually the leading force in the planet some centuries ago. I hope that Europe will have the leadership we need. We have the human capital, we have the ability to have a stronger position in the world. I hope we achieve it.
Indeed, it's $1 million or euro question. Nobody has the answer, but the tendencies are quite worrisome for Europe. So again, we have to put ourselves together and starting with the critical thinking, looking at the world not as we used to perceive it or as we want it to be, but as it is. So start from realism. On that basis, shape your policies. Because China indeed, as Notis said, has a big advantage in long-term planning and in patience. But they have their internal problems and tensions. Let's not underestimate them. The thing is indeed that democracy has a price. And we don't want to live in a society as the Chinese, with total, control. We are a different model. Maybe for them it works well, and apparently they achieve big results, but we can learn some things from them about strategic planning, after all. I think we should find ways to agree on this, which sectors we develop, how we invest, because after 2009, Europe is severely underinvesting in our economies. And I see now a big focus on, I would say, militarization of our economies. It can be, to a certain extent, a source of innovation, creating jobs, driving the economy further, but I would be very cautious about this. If you look at the best historical example about so-called, but it was named after the Second World War, military Keynesianism, the best example is Germany in the 1930s. Do you know how it ended? Because it can create productivity, jobs, etc., innovation. But in order to keep on going, it needs a war. And this is why I mentioned peace and cooperation as the initial idea of Europe after the horrors which we lived through in the 20th century. And we have to learn from this and not forget about it, because we are taking peace for granted. And I'm, frankly speaking, furious when I see the war 300 kilometers from here in Ukraine. Europe justly supported and is supporting Ukraine in its defense, but Europe is absent from the political domain and from diplomacy. This is absurd. We have to be realists on this and have our own initiatives and think about, I'm often given this example, about 1960s and the example of Willy Brandt, who used to be the mayor of West Berlin, then Chancellor of Germany. 1 year after the darkest moment of the Cold War, Willy Brandt launched, with a lot of political risks and big criticism against him, New Eastern policy, which led in 1974 to the Helsinki Act, the best thing which we saw during the Cold War, where human rights were on the table, but there was also security for both parts of Europe, of the continent. If we don't work towards such a system for our continent, which will provide security for all, not security for one part thinking that the others can be insecure, we'll pay a price as we are paying today.
I had to think about the last question that I had the choice to ask you personally, and I chose to sort of zoom out from the geopolitical diagnoses that we spent the panel saying and sharing with each other, and to something that happened more recently. And I would be really, really curious to know how you feel about the Bulgarian Socialist Party not entering the next parliament, and what you think that says about social democracy and its trajectory in Europe.
I'm feeling bad because when we were in government together with Nikolai, I was the leader of the party, it had 32% in the elections. Now it didn't overcome the threshold. There are many reasons for this which happened in the past 10 years. But maybe it's a good moment to say, especially to our international guests, actually what happened in Bulgaria in these elections, because they don't know. And they're wondering, you know, frankly speaking, for last 5 years, can we deal with Bulgaria at all? Is it a manageable country? 8 elections, yeah? We lost the count here in Bulgaria. Actually, if you look backwards, there were 3 periods in Bulgaria's political history since 1989. 90s confrontation between the democratic forces and the Socialist Party. It was very exhausting. We made a lot of mistakes, and part of the bad reforms happened during to this confrontation and lack of dialogue. Then, 2001, 2009, a period of dialogue, cooperation. Even when we were on different sides of the barricade, we were talking to each other and we were having common national goals. Then, 2009, 2020, it was the complete, gradually increasing dominance of the GER party led by Borisov. By Borisov, because this is a leader's party, not an ideological one. And actually, the last 5 years were about the wish of a very big part of the society to dismantle the model which was established in these 10, 11 years, which was very centralized, all the economic, political power in one hand. Then it was, you know, developed by his partners as well. But this was what it was about. And Bulgarians were making experiments. Okay, we tried with this showman, Itana, Slavitrif. Ironically, people who were making fun of politicians for 20 years, becoming politicians, they felt on the first step. Then PPDP, they also fell. So in these elections, the Bulgarians found a way, finally, to invest into one political actor who didn't make a compromise with the existing model. It was the former president, Radev, and they decided this is the way to do it, because all who made a compromise in the past years were punished, including the Socialist Party, but also the rest. And now we are opening a new chapter. How it will turn, we don't know yet, but it will change things. And I believe at the first stage at least, definitely for better, for positive. I hope the winner who receives such a big mandate will not lose touch with the ground and will not try to reproduce in a different way the same model, but I think economy will be freer. I think there will be judicial reform in Bulgaria. I think many things will change for better, but we have to be watchful. And this is why, by the way, the lack of a left in the parliament is not good news for everybody. Because for a society to walk and to be stable, to walk forwards and to be stable, you need, you know, your right leg, your left leg, and then move them together towards some goal. If you don't have one part, you will be limping or you will fall.
Thank you so much for your answer.
Okay, and now I'm gonna go into the final part of our panel, where I wanted to ask a few questions about immigration. So, Mr. Mitarachi, migration has become one of the defining moments in Europe. Do you believe Europe currently has strategy, or it's still reaching rather than leading?
First of all, I cannot agree that the lack of left is a problem. But I would agree that balance is always required in democracies.
I think in your heart you agree.
Now, talking about migration on the left. Now, it's clear that Europe has no idea what they want to do with migration. There is no common European policy on migration. We have some regulations, we have some directives over the years. The Geneva Convention was agreed many decades ago to handle what we call direct movement of people in need to safe places. That was a very big moral advantage for the world, that the fact that we agreed on the Geneva Convention. And I'm very proud as a member of the Council of the European Union, I was one of the ministers that signed the waiver for Ukrainians to come to the European Union freely after the Russian invasion. You recall that Ukraine is bordering a number of European Union countries. Also, I'm in favor of migration as a concept. I believe people should be allowed to travel through an organized way. Work visas, student visas, tourist visas, talent visas. It is an element that gives diversity and fresh blood to our societies. That's a good thing. I live in a number of countries. I have a number of foreign friends living in Greece. That's wonderful. But what I disagree with is what's happening in the last 10 years, which is mass movements of people from all over the world to Europe, with no rules, no regulations. We think we have an asylum strategy, we don't. People just jump over the fence. They apply for asylum. If it's accepted, they stay. If it's rejected, they stay. It makes no sense that we have all this complicated rule book about who is entitled to asylum and who is not, if we're incompetent of returning those not deemed eligible for international protection. So the whole system has failed. And that is creating a big strain on the credibility of what you would call the global refugee policy. Now somebody would ask, what is the humanitarian and moral duty of Europe? It's a very difficult question. One answer is to get into Europe everyone that lives in standards below Europe. So invite 5 billion people to come to Europe. I think you will soon realize we don't have that capacity. Europe cannot change in itself alone all the global imbalances. I would love it if we could. We are trying, we are helping, we're part of many global organizations that are providing aid. Is it sufficient? Probably not. There is a lot of challenges around the world which Europe is not responsible for. We try to help. I remember when we had the collapse of the Afghan government, Greece gave a few hundred visas to women in leadership positions in Afghanistan, which were obviously under personal threat from the Taliban government. We welcome ministers, judges, mayors, members of parliament, female, that obviously under the Taliban regime they would have been individually targeted by the new regime, and we invited them to Greece. We work with a number of international organizations. They crossed the borders by car, dangerous crossings, and then they came with organized flights with Greek humanitarian visas. And a number of countries did the same. But you cannot say that allowing people just to jump the fence and come into Europe is a solution to migration. So A, we need to protect the external border. B, we need to be very clear who is entitled to asylum in Europe. And I recall the point of direct movement as a key driver for our decision-making needs. And 3, we need to be able to return with dignity and safety back to the countries of transit or the countries of origin, those not entitled to international protection. Countries are defined by certain things, by the ability to govern themselves, the ability to rule themselves, have a legal framework, and have borders. Borders is a key definer of what we call sovereignty. And I think we lost track of that in Europe.
Thank you very much. Thank you to our panelists today for such insightful discussion on some of the most important issues we face in today's society. Maybe to finish off this panel, I would like to invite Mr. Nikolai Vasilyev to the stage just to say a few words and to close this panel.
Thank you. Well, I tried very hard to come out of this panel, but somehow you brought me back. I'll be very short. The next panel is bigger, that's why. I'll try to be very short. I liked very much what everyone said here. I hope you would agree that inviting younger people to take part and moderate this panel was a good idea. I think we'll do it more in the future. Now, what should I say? In my capacity of a former politician and an active citizen, I think Europe as a whole, Central and Eastern Europe as a whole, and Bulgaria face 4 major groups of problems. And because many of us here are good mathematicians, you will understand my point. It's a multiplication, not an addition. A multiplication of 4 factors. So if any one of them becomes 0, the whole product and result is 0. I'll start with number 4. So if you know me well, you will know I'm somewhat a hardliner in my beliefs, and also I prefer to be a doer and not a philosopher. Number 4, migration and defense. My view is similar to what you just heard a few moments ago. I think Europe is weak. It just has to stop illegal migration overnight. Alternatively, there will be no Europe. Let me tell our foreign guests here, you might not know, but Bulgaria is one of the oldest states in Europe, founded in the year of 681. Okay, Notis can claim Greece, you know. Okay. So in my youth, in my childhood, we celebrated 13 centuries history of Bulgaria. I would like my children and grandchildren to be able to celebrate 14 centuries of Bulgaria. Will they? I don't know. Not sure. This is probably the first global generation when the children are not completely sure that they will live better than their parents. And that's very bad news. So, I would say stop illegal migration overnight and make Europe a global military power immediately. Do you remember that Notis an hour ago said a century ago we were discussing our borders here? Mr. Stanishev is a historian. He might know better than me. But 110 years ago, during 2 moments in history, Bulgaria, a small nation of some 3 million people, had the 3rd largest army in the world. And you remember the results of those events, good or bad. Number 3, which is especially important for Bulgaria this week. I think the countries in Central and Eastern Europe, from the Baltics to Ukraine, Bulgaria, should keep their Western orientation. Because if we don't, I'm not sure about the future of this part of the world. And the only question that dozens of my foreign friends around the world asked me in the last week is the same question that you've been asked by your foreign friends. What's going on in Bulgaria? Where are you going? Frankly, we don't know. We shall see. Number two, as an economist, I believe in sound economic policies, not based on populism, but on strong fundamentals. During this century, some of the strongest nations will be the ones with strong public finances, and half of the world will go bankrupt in our lifetime. You remember this when it happens. I think it will happen, because with this amount of debt in the private sector and especially in the public sector, there is no mathematical way out. And I'm afraid the mathematical way out is either super hyperinflation to inflate the debt away, or war. That's why you know me as the biggest budget hawk in this country. I support budget surpluses, private sector investment, low tax. The foreigners might know, but you are guests of the country in Europe with the lowest direct taxes of 10% that we were very proud to introduce during our coalition government. Number one, you might be surprised that I'm the one to tell you this, but you know, I'm finding it very worrying that no one in the country, I don't know a second person in the country who is really worried about this problem. No politician, we just had elections, 0 times mentioning this issue. No demographer will be on television this week. This week the birth rate data for last year will come out. Bulgaria has another super low record of low birth rate. Something like 50,000 babies last year. After World War II, when the population was much smaller, almost 200,000 kids were born per year. 35 years ago, 120,000. Mr. Stanishev, you might remember when you finished your term, Bulgaria had another peak of like 82,000. Since then, a steady direction downwards, 50,000. I'm afraid to ask the politically incorrect question. Can somebody please tell us the ethnic composition of these 50,000? No one dares to ask this question, and definitely nobody dares to answer this question. So my question to all the politicians from all parties into the future government, my question is, when are you going to wake up and realize that the demography is the biggest problem of this country, of this region, and of this continent? And my final sentence, I spent much of my youth trying to help Bulgaria join NATO and the European Union. As a CFA board member here, we organized 5 large national conferences to support the Eurozone. Finally, we made it, against all the odds. We invited 5 foreign prime ministers in the last years here at our similar conferences to support the Eurozone. But if you read my books, and if you ask me what I've told my children, have I told them that Europe is the best, like the most future-oriented place on earth? No, in my books I say, America first, Asia second. So if we don't wake up, there will be no 14 centuries of this nation. Thanks a lot.